Did you know how controversial fashion was during World War II? Well, racial tensions were ultimately the cause of the 1943 zoot suit riots in California. The suits that used excessive fabric and the men that wore them were targeted because of their seemingly lack of patriotism. This just comes from Wikipedia, but it does lead me into my first point about 1940s fashion. In 1940, dresses with excessive fabric all over the bodice, women who wore lots of jewelry, such as rings, watches, earrings, and women that had long hair were considered the beauty ideal, and this was a very popular look. But during World War II, that changed because of three main points: a sense of patriotic duty among the American women on the home front, the rationing that was implemented during World War II, and women entering the workforce. The first point of why fashion changed among American women during World War II was because of a sense of patriotic duty. So this just meant that women's efforts went towards the war instead of back at home, and examples in fashion are conserving fabric and wearing older clothing, because obviously the war needed materials. Clothes were encouraged to be reduced and reused, and movie stars and magazines encouraged this as well. And the newest trend was square shoulders and shorter skirts. Now the skirts were not that much shorter. They went from mid-calf length all the way up to knee length. But that did still save quite a bit of fabric, and every little bit was important during World War II. Another campaign that was very popular to conserve materials was sewing and knitting victory campaigns of old wool sweaters, and this just comes from Baker, a source who wrote about women during World War II. Something that did not change because of World War II, though, was cosmetics. Women argued that their patriotic duty included being all fancied up for their husbands when they came home, or for the soldiers who were working hard overseas. So especially lipstick was non-negotiable, but face powder and deodorant were also considered vital. And once again, these were just argued to help boost the soldiers' morale. The second point about women's fashion changing on the American home front was because rationing was really harsh. The U.S. Production Board issued limitation orders meant to save 15% of domestic fabric production and 40 to 50 million pounds of wool. This comes from Baker. And a popular saying during this time was, wear it out, make it do, or do without. And this just comes from any sort of clothing item that you can imagine. Once again, this just comes from Baker. So as we know, skirts were shortened, as were coats and blouses, and this is where we actually start to see the first of the bikini, because in 1943, the government issued swimwear be reduced by 1/10. So that's when we start to see women's midriffs being shown off, and this comes from Baker. Not everyone suffered because of rationing, though. Some people really took advantage of it, and one example of this is Claire McCardle, who was an early 1940s fashion designer. She used cotton, denim, gingham, and calico for comfortable and practical clothing. And finally, the last reason that American women's fashion changed during World War II was for safety in the workplace. So in aircraft factories in the first 2 years of World War II, 475,000 women entered these jobs. This comes from Weatherford, who also published a book on American women during World War II. Uniforms did become popular, not only because obviously they're safer, but also because they did save time shopping, and women couldn't afford to go to work and spend time away from their homes where they needed to do all of the cooking and the cleaning. Short bobs during this time also became really popular because if a woman was working with machinery and her long hair got caught, she would be scalped, which is terrible. Also, if she had long hair and she was working with gunpowder, some of the gunpowder could easily get trapped, and that's how fire starts really easily. So altogether, these factors contributed to women's fashion in the 1940s, especially World War II change.